The Rams in New Orleans for the second time this season. Earlier this season, I believe it was 45-42. Saints with the win over the Rams. The Rams had to come back from a lot in that game. Were able to get close, but the Saints in one of those typical Rams shootouts were able to win the game. So that's what happened earlier. Once again, we are in the Superdome. The line right now, New Orleans by 3.5. Jared, what's your take on this game? You don't have to make a prediction necessarily yet, but just kind of analyze what you expect to happen in this football game.
Yeah, no, like I mentioned earlier in the show when we were talking about the Saints and how they beat the Eagles and how the Saints came off to a sluggish start at the beginning of that game. They went down 14-0 early. That will not happen again. And I think one of the coolest things that head coach Sean Payton did before these playoffs started, for those who don't know, Sean Payton went into the locker room before last week's game with $225,000 in cash. Let me say that again. Yeah. $225,000 in cash.
That's cash.
And a Super Bowl ring. He was surrounded by bodyguards, security guards, and he basically went into the locker room, surrounded all of his players, and he said, y'all want this? And by the way, that $250,000 cash, that is the bonus money that every single player would get if they won the Super Bowl. So if that isn't a little extra motivation for you, I don't know what is. And he basically said, y'all want this money, go effing win 3 games. Yeah. So the Saints won the first. They got 2 more to go. And listen, they've got a tough task with the Rams coming in, obviously, with their dominant performance, beating the Cowboys last week. Really, I think this game will end just like it did the first time these two teams met. I think it's going to be very, very close, high scoring. I can see it in the 30s or the 40s again. Both of these defenses are mediocre, especially in their pass and their secondary. So I think Drew Brees and Jared Goff are both going to light it up. And I can see it coming down to who has the ball last, right? Or which defense is going to show up. I mean, we saw the Rams defense stop the Cowboys' rushing attack last week, and we saw the Saints from the second quarter on of the Eagles game basically dominate the Eagles in all facets. So which defense will really step up and make a play? Because as of right now, I think both of these offenses are legit. They're scary, and when they get going, they're somewhat unstoppable. So that is my question to you, Nick. Which defense do you have more confidence in?
You know what? That's a hard question to ask. It's more about with me. It's actually more about what offense I think is better, and what offense I trust. And I'm going to go back to my old adage that I usually do on this podcast or on Twitter. I think the better quarterback is going to win this game. And you looked at the divisional games and the conference championship are completely different, because the divisional games, especially when the 1 and 2 seeds advance, they had an extra week to prepare, right? And in the Rams' case, they kind of had 3 extra weeks to prepare because they played the Cardinals and 49ers to end the season. So they were really probably looking at the Cowboys. They were probably looking at the Cowboys tape one day out of the week going, okay, or they're looking at all the other playoff teams they could possibly play, and then when they knew it was more than likely going to be the Cowboys, they said, let's torch them on the run, and they did that and were able to defeat them. But not to try to take shots at you, because there was no reason to do that, but nonetheless, I think it's going to come down. I agree with you. I think it's going to be close. I don't think it's going to be a shootout. I think it will be a little more low scoring, maybe in the 20s or the low 30s. Maybe 30. My prediction is going to be 31-28 Saints. I just think Drew Brees is going to do enough to get them over the hump, kind of like he did in the game against the Eagles and like he did in a lot of games. It seems like Drew Brees' season, kind of. And the Rams have improved, and they're looking a little bit better, but they're kind of just the team that was thrown together before the season. A lot of all-stars, and a lot of times it isn't working. You look at the Miami Heat in their first year together, they did not win a championship, right? Now, I'm not even saying the Rams are going to get there, but a lot of times when you throw a bunch of personalities out there, and I made the comments about Marcus Peters earlier on this podcast, when you throw a lot of these guys together, a lot of times it might not work out in the biggest game. And I do think the Saints are more of a team. They've gelled. They have a lot of the same players they've had. Michael Thomas is arguably the best receiver in the league. Drew Brees is arguably a top 3 quarterback in the league. So I think that the Saints defense will do enough, even though they lost Sheldon Rankins. I think they'll do enough as far as aerial stoppage of Jared Goff And I think they'll do enough to try to stop that. They won't let fat C.J. Anderson get 130 yards like he did against Cowboys. Gurley might do well, but there's going to be some scoring, and I think they'll do enough. They'll stop the rush enough, and they'll make Jared Goff make mistakes, and that's what will get them a win. I say the Saints win 31-28, but they could win by a touchdown. It will be a one-score game, but I'm going with the New Orleans Saints to make it to the Super Bowl.